So it is 5:01 p.m. Thank you. Great. 5:01 p.m. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Let's take roll to establish quorum, if we could. Jamie?
Mr. Bray? Ms. Lyons?
Present.
Mr. Marcus? Mr. Carney?
I am here.
Mr. Parker? Mr. Rosa? Mr. Chavon? And Chair Blank.
Oh,
Present.
they're different.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. And just, Mr. Chavon actually reached out to me earlier today advising he would not be present today and specifically asked that I place the reason on the record. It is because he has a current positive COVID diagnosis, so he didn't want us to think that he was skipping out to celebrate or party somehow, but he wanted us to know why, and I said, "You sure you want me?" Yeah, he wanted it on the record, so with his approval, I am so putting it on the record, and I hope that he has a speedy recovery. Okay, so that's going to bring us to the approval of the minutes. Hopefully, everybody's had a chance to review those. Are there any amendments or modifications to the minutes from our, I guess, was meeting held on July 6th of 2022?
I move to accept the minutes as they stand.
Second.
Okay, moved by Mr. Carney, seconded by Ms. Lyons. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so the minutes will be approved. I'll go ahead and sign off on those right now. Oops. All right, so we do have one action item on the agenda for tonight. So if there are any members of the public who plan to be heard on that item, as well as if the applicant is present, please stand to be sworn in at this time.
Do you, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. All right, so that will bring us to agenda item 4A, Certificate of Appropriateness for Demolition, case number UDP HP 22018, demolition of a one-story accessory structure. The applicant is in fact the city through the agent Enrique Sanchez, who is the Deputy Director of Parks and Rec. Address at 1016 Waverly Road. Let's go ahead and do disclosures. We will start with Mr. Bray. Mr. Bray, any disclosures on this?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So I did not seek to be on the HPB member. I was asked by the commissioners to serve on HPB, was nominated, and unanimously appointed by the commissioners of the city of Fort Lauderdale to serve as a representative of the resident Senate community as a volunteer. I do not seek a position or opportunity of power to benefit from this role, but rather as a longtime resident of the city of Fort Lauderdale, a civic duty and an opportunity to bring the best possible outcomes for the community. As an owner of multiple contributing properties and longtime resident of Sailboat Bend, I have had significant opportunities to observe activities and changes to the Rivermont Midden property. I have been in communications with various city staff and representatives, mostly by email due to the pandemic, about the property over the past 2 years since the city of Fort Lauderdale began the process of obtaining the property. The communications were intended as a concerned neighbor to a historic landmark property in the city of Fort Lauderdale, where there is an absentee owner to inform the city of their various observations routinely occurring. I tried for the past 2 years to have discussions with the city of Fort Lauderdale staff, the Sailboat Bend Civic Association, the Fort Lauderdale Historic Society, Riverwalk, and private foundations about trying to make plans for the archaeological and historic park, only to be informed no one can act or assist without the city of Fort Lauderdale inclusion. Parks and Recreation's repeated response to my inquiries was there are no plans or budget for the property yet. Since being appointed by the city commissioners to HPB, I have discontinued efforts regarding the property. As now being a member of the Historic Preservation Board, I felt I had an added duty to historic preservation in the city to inform the board and the community on issues and information learned over the uses which pertain to the historic Rivermont Midden applications. I believe the April application lacked relevant information and therefore asked to call up the administrative approval of the fence application submitted for discussion by the board. There was no indication from the city that any additional motions, seconds, or full approval of HPB was necessary for them to be added to the April agenda for the fence application at 1016 Waverly Road and was therefore added to the agenda. Dr. Kiner, as a previous HB board chair and owner of an adjoining property, was on the board at the time when the same property came before HPB for review by the previous owners, Ms. Grossman, in July of 2015. He was advised by the city council at the time that he need not recuse himself and should continue to serve on the case. He continued to serve as chairman and voting board member during those discussions. When an application for the property at 1016 Waverly Road came before HPB members, I had concerns, but did not feel it was appropriate for board members to be in direct communications with the applicant. I was informed by the city legal staff that I was able to communicate with the applicant. Days later, I proceeded to call the Director of Parks and Recreation to inquire if he was willing to walk the property with me to discuss the application and provide for more clarification. He declined and wanted to proceed with the application as planned. Shortly thereafter, I received an email from the city legal department suggesting I should not vote on the city of Fort Lauderdale's application because I owned an adjoining property. During the 2 weeks prior to this item on the HPB agenda, there was no indication it needed full board approval to be added to the agenda, or I would not be allowed to participate on this item until hours before the meeting. The only apparent difference between the two cases was the ownership of the property, changed to the city of Fort Lauderdale and no longer held by a private citizen. I've added concerns when the application before HPB is the city of Fort Lauderdale. The approval of the application is the city of Fort Lauderdale, and the legal counsel is provided by the city of Fort Lauderdale to determine the merits of an application. In any other application before HPB, an applicant could not approve and provide legal counsel or run interference on an application before board members. If it is noted that one of the top priorities for 2022 City of Fort Lauderdale agenda is historic preservation, is the city setting the pace and example of preserving, rehabilitating, restoring, and reconstructing, especially on the only archaeological site in the downtown area and in a historic district. As the current owners, the city of Fort Lauderdale has a responsibility to be better stewards in the history and the archaeology of this property, and at the very least, prevent further harm. From the Parks and Recreation own master plan is the statement, community involvement is the cornerstone of the qualitative technique method for the City of Fort Lauderdale Parks and Recreation System Plan, with the top 3 priorities being improved safety and security, upgrade existing facilities, and improve communications between the public and Parks and Recreation. I have concerns with any significant property in the community where city-owned or commercial development where the applicant has not included relevant stakeholders in the conversation before planning a project before submitting an application. These projects have significant impacts on a neighborhood and the city residents. To my knowledge, the application has had little to no input from the Seattle Bend Civic Association, neighboring properties, Native American communities, academic institutions, or archaeological and historic organizations to address city plans for their property or address various stakeholders' concerns about the property. There are numerous opportunities for a public park to obtain assistance with inclusion of stakeholders to achieve insights and funding through county, state, federal, and private grants, public-private partnerships, and community fundraising. I try to have a higher standard of ethics and want the best the city can accomplish in our communities, not the minimum effort or minimum acceptable standard. I do feel I have a unique perspective on the property, having interacted with the last 4 owners of the property, observed the property daily to see the changes during the past 17 years, having worked with a historic public garden and lived and owned numerous historic properties in various cities. I have no direct financial connection to the property. Any indirect financial impact from my participation or voting on this property would have to be the same as any other property application before HPB. Because of the innuendo from the April HPB meeting regarding an application on this property, I feel I should recuse myself from the process of participating and voting on this item. I will step down from the dais and make a statement as a resident, providing an opportunity for the other board members to ask those questions of me.
Thank you, Mr. Bray. I just want to confirm what I heard here beyond your personal objection to this item, or what appears to be personal objection to the item.
I couldn't understand what he said.
I'm gonna
You're gonna do a synopsis?
let me try to see if I can just summarize, just to make sure that I understood you correctly. And the reason why, Mr. Bray, is it was a little difficult to hear you. I heard you, but I think that might have been my positioning with you. I think that some of the members on the other side of the dais may not have heard you as clearly. So beyond having a personal objection to this item, or what appeared to be a personal objection to this item, you, based on recommendation by the city and personal understanding of your obligations as a member of this board, are recusing yourself from this item? Is that correct?
I am, and I could submit the notes for your review if you'd like.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that I correctly understood that. Okay. So, Mr. Bray, you, of course, will have an opportunity later to address the board again on this item as a member of the public, if you wish. But have you filed, I don't know if a recusal form needs to be filed on something like this?
I believe he is abstaining from voting based on, or recusing himself based on 286.0112, which states that a member may abstain from voting on a matter if abstention is to assure a fair proceeding free from potential bias or prejudice.
Is that correct, Mr. Bray?
Well, that was the innuendo from April, so that's why I'm following through and recusing because that was the city's innuendo that I was left with.
Understood.
So
So,
I'm sorry. I just don't want to, unless I'm asked for some facts, I'd rather not,
no,
but
we're going to say yes. That appears to be the statute under which Mr. Bray is disqualifying himself from consideration of this item. Now, but here's the other, well, and I don't know if they necessarily play into one another, but am I correct in understanding that this item was submitted for administrative review, and Mr. Bray, you asked that it come before the whole board? Is that why?
I did in April, yes.
Got it, okay.
That
And that's,
wasn't this exact application, it was for the fencing that came before in April.
I see.
And
Got it.
so I would have wanted to have a further discussion about it, but it was dismissed and it kind of all happened quickly and I didn't understand why, but there was some ruling and some discussion about the, I guess, ordinances that were involved, so it got dropped.
Got it. Understood. Okay. So, all right. So that's really not for consideration for this item. And the key factor here is just that you have determined that you have a conflict and therefore are disqualifying yourself from consideration on this item. And I appreciate your candor in that regard. So with that, we'll continue on with disclosures by the board. Mr. Carney, any disclosures?
Nothing to disclose.
Thank you. I have none. Mr. Marcus, any disclosures?
None to it.
Thank you. Ms. Lyons?
You can't see inside the property. There's a gate. So I've walked by it many times, but I can't see this particular structure.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, is a member of the city here present to present, or their representative present to present on the property? Great. Trish, you want to give us a staff report while the city is approaching the lectern?
Sure. Good afternoon, board members. Tricia Logan, Urban Design and Planning. This subject property is located in the Sailboat Bend Historic District and is part of the Rivermont Archaeological Site, which was designated by the city in 2021 and was recently listed on the National Register. The application before you is for the demolition of a one-story accessory structure located on the site. This structure, staff believes we couldn't obtain the archival information in time, but believes that it was already approved by the Historic Preservation Board in 2015 under a separate application that described the structure as a boathouse. The building itself is what it remains is a shell and does not have architectural features to discern its particular use other than the archival information that we could obtain in the time period allowed for our review. But in the review of what we had in front of us, this application does meet all of our criteria under the ULDR.
Trish, before you go on in the report, just a quick question here. If this board has previously approved the demolition of this structure, why is it here again?
So approvals do expire if a permit is not pulled. They have 18 months to pull a permit if the application has been approved. And then they have 24 months from the date of approval in order to have the permit issued. From our records, we did not see that a permit application was filed for the demolition.
Thank you.
So with that, I'll read the summary conclusion. In accordance with the ULDR, staff finds that the application for a certificate of appropriateness for demolition under case number UDP-HP 22018, located at 1016 Waverly Road, meets the criteria as outlined in section 472411 D3CI of the ULDR and meets the criteria as outlined in section 472411 D4 of the ULDR. The following conditions for the COA for demolition are provided for consideration by the HPB if the application is to be approved. 1, an archaeologist must monitor all ground disturbing work associated with the demolition of this accessory structure. A final monitoring report must be provided to the Historic Preservation Board liaison prior to final inspection of the building permit. 2, the demolition of the structure shall not negatively impact the adjacent historic district, and protection from construction debris and construction equipment shall be provided as necessary. 3, place the temporary fencing separating intact areas of the, from the proposed demolition area. 4, propose written guidelines and meet with the contractor to advise of the sensitivity of the parcel so they can help implement these measures. 5, place environmental fabric and fill across and along the access road for demolition equipment to have access without impacting the cultural deposits below. 6, use an assigned staging area to store equipment and supplies. 7, any filling of the demolished areas will use clean fill and not existing soils from the parcel. And 8, this application is subject to the approval by building, zoning, and all ULDR requirements.
Thank you, Trish. All right, representative from the city.
Yes, hi, good evening. My name is Kimberly Pearson.
Can you do me a favor, Ms. Pearson? I'm sorry, can you really get into that microphone? They're not
Yes,
really
sir. Is that
cranked
better?
much. Thank you. Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Pearson. I am Parks Manager for the city.
Oh, we lost her. Hang on 2 seconds. They're working on it. I got the universal signal for hang on, we're fixing it. All right, should be good to go, Ms. Pearson.
Better?
Yes, thank you.
All right, third time's a try. All right. My name is Kimberly Pearson. I am the Parks Manager for the City of Fort Lauderdale Parks and Recreation. This property falls within my district of District 5, and we supplied the application to demo the structure, and we've been working with Tricia to process this application for demo of the structure, and we're here to answer whatever questions you may have.
All right, thank you so much. Anybody from the board have any questions of Ms. Pearson at this time?
I got a question.
Yeah, please.
Any reason why the city didn't pull the permit the first time around back in 2015?
No, sir, I do not know that reason why.
According to Trish, it was 2015. This is the second time around.
I can assist in,
Yes, to come to the mic.
Say again, I'm sorry?
the city did not own the property until
Oh, okay,
2021.
Okay, my apologies.
That would be why. At least why they didn't. I can't speak to the prior owner. Okay, any other questions of Ms. Pearson currently? Otherwise, I'm going to open it up to the public, and then we can always come back and recall her if need be. All right, thank you so much, ma'am. Any members of the public wishing to be heard on this item? Mr. Bray? Go ahead. All right.
Could I just ask IT, can you please make sure the closed caption is on for all the meetings? Thanks.
Did you guys get that? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Mr. Bray, do me a favor. You are going to have 3 minutes to address the board. Please state your name and put your address on the record if you could first.
Name is Richard Bray, 416 Palm Avenue, Fort Lauderdale.
Thank you.
All right, I don't know if the overhead comes on or if you can see anything, but
Mr. Bray, make sure that you speak into the microphone. We can't hear you over here.
It's being switched over right now.
Oh, I see. Okay. I'm going to give Mr. Bray the benefit of his time back while he's setting up here.
all right. This property is not like any other park. It is an archaeological site in the city's only historic district. Therefore, it should be treated with more specific respect and preserving the caring for its history. The city and HPB should make the most of this opportunity since the property is one of the oldest and possibly holds the most relevant overall history of our community. Once the structure is demolished, there will never be an opportunity to have another structure built as close to the water due to the changes in city ordinances. This structure appears to have once been a boathouse, a studio for teaching art by Mrs. Camilla Woodward in September 1947, and a garage. Has the applicant researched the history of the structure and considered the possibility of reconstructing a building which could once again become a place for students to learn about art, life along the New River, and various indigenous and earlier residents in this area? I do believe the structural integrity on the property on the majority of the current boathouse, art studio, and garage structure has been significantly diminished. There appears to be two columns, two concrete and rebar support columns, along with a significant concrete wall on the northeastern portion of the building structure, which appears salvageable. The northeast wall is a particular concern because it is because it is demolished, it opens up a big gap on the eastern property line to the adjoining contributing residential home without any barrier between the properties and could further diminish the structural integrity of the existing cinder block wall on the southeast side of the building, which may be an encroachment onto the adjoining contributing property to the immediate east. HPB and the applicant should be considering potential unintended or unexpected consequences on a request for demolition of the entire structure. An alternative to reconstructing the structure might be to retain the concrete columns and concrete wall on the northeastern side, would provide for a location to have information displayed to tell a history of the structure or midden. With further planning, the columns and wall could also support an open area of cover for visitors to the park. There are a number of issues concerning the application has neglected to address on the property during the past 2 years, which are and will continue to diminish the integrity of the site. One of those is the erosion and water intrusion due to the sloping and nature of the property. If the cinder block wall on the east side of the structure is demolished, how will the city address the opening which could be created and the erosion of soil and the water intrusion onto the adjoining property at 934 Waverly Road? City ordinances do call for conditions and safeguards to be used to protect areas of interest and abutting properties. The recommendation is to take 60 or 90 days to meet with various stakeholders, like the Sailboat Bend Civic Association and their Parks Committee, Native American Indians, neighbors, city and county historic organizations, and archaeologists to collaborate on plans to protect and preserve the National Archaeological Site and tell the story of the property through preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, or reconstruction of all existing structural elements on the property for potential uses, including the north and east cinder block walls and fencing before demolishing or covering up the history of the property. City employees should be working to build the best possible outcome in collaboration on behalf of the residents of this community. The city review said the structure no longer contributes to the integrity of the district. I disagree with the statement, as I believe it is one of the last remaining historic elements that represents life on the New River in the earliest 20th century. I believe this is an integral part of the district's history and the structural augments part of the story of Sailboat Bend. I also disagree with the application meets the criteria in several ULDR sections as a result of the structure representing some key elements of integrity to the Sailboat Bend as a boathouse, art studio, and accessory structure on the New River. More and more of the history of early 20th century residents and structures are being removed, and the information is disappearing.
Thank you, Mr. Bray. If you could just wrap it up, I'll give you a moment to conclude if you'd like.
All right. Demolition may also have potential detrimental ground disturbances which could cause concern for an adjoining contributing structure inches away. I will also note Dave Baber of the Broward Historical Commission makes note of in previous HPB meetings regarding the property that the county requires review of the site by an archaeologist prior to any earth moving. I understand residents want a park open and accessible to the public, and Parks and Recreation is trying to provide it. But noted earlier, there has been little effort to build consensus with various stakeholders on any plans for this property thus far. Sending an email or letter out to the public outreach to announce plans do not collaboration or consensus with stakeholders about what is wanted or preferred. Where is the effort to implement what the community wants rather than what is easiest for city employees to check off a list of supposed accomplishments? Having a video meeting without minutes or memo for review for future development is not sufficient input or outreach either. Therefore, please ask the applicant to postpone demolition to do further work on the property's history in collaboration with relevant stakeholders.
Thank you, Mr. Bray. Are there any other members of the public wishing to be heard on this item? Dr. Kiner, good to see you as always.
I can't talk as fast as he does.
Well, I think I gave Mr. Bray probably about 5 minutes, so we'll be lenient as well, Doctor. I promise. Of course.
How are you?
Well, one minute. Just don't address anything
Right.
that you're handing to the board until you get to the lectern, if you would. But just so the record's clear, Dr. Kiner is passing out some demonstrative aids to his presentation he's about to make to the board. And I'll ask that a copy of that be made part of the record.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Is my mic on?
It is.
I have one question for Mr. Bray.
Well,
Or how are we doing?
I'm
this?
well, I don't think that, that it's really appropriate to ask questions of
Okay.
the public.
Okay.
So let's wait till the public, comment is closed,
Well,
then we
then I
can
have a
ask questions of the
question
applicant
for-
and of Trish.
For Tricia.
Let's hold off until
Okay.
the public comment's closed, but I have a couple of questions as well, so trust me, we're gonna have a discussion. Write your question down, Mr. Marcus, so you don't forget.
Oh, I know you
Write it
won't
down so you
forget.
He
don't
won't
forget.
forget.
All right. That's what I have to do. I have to write it
I
down
know
because
what
I'll
mine
forget.
is.
Could I get someone to turn this on?
Can one of you fine gentlemen in the back of the room assist Dr. Kiner with the Elmo? Assist Dr. Kiner with the Elmo, maybe? It is on, Dr. Kiner, so you should be good to go there. There might even be a little switch to zoom in and zoom out if you need to, because it looks like it's pretty zoomed in. And this microphone keeps cutting in and out. I'm loud. Trish, can you maybe do me a favor and help Dr. Kiner just zoom out a little bit on that so we could see what it is that he wants to show us? I'm sorry? Oh, it won't zoom out? Okay. All right, we'll work with it.
He's moving it, I'm not moving.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, my name is David Kiner, and I am the owner of a property.
Dr. Kiner, do me a favor. I'm sorry. Get right into that microphone for me. It's not really sensitive. And if you could also put your address on the record.
Yes, so my name is David Kiner, and I'm the owner of the property at 934 Waverly Road, which is the opposite side of the Midden from where Richard, 416 Palm Avenue. So my goal is to share the information that hasn't been provided to the HBB and to draw your attention to the many questions.
Could you
that-
speak more loudly?
Wow. I'll try.
Sorry
Thank
about
you.
My goal is to
Much better.
share information that hasn't been provided to the HPB and to draw your attention to the many questions that only you can direct to the applicant for answers before making a non-reversible decision allowing demolition. It is not the only solution to the requested C of A or the wisest. I urge you to allow the applicant to request a 60-day delay so that they can adequately address the unresolved problems that I have listed at the end of the handout that I have given you. That's the last 2 pages. I want to acknowledge Ms. Pearson from the P&R for her pragmatic, good sense solution regarding best practices for the historic structure. I was informed that P&R intended to secure the old structure with temporary fencing running around it and continuing all the way to the seawall. This could provide an adequate protection against provide adequate protection. Plus, P&R could quickly get the gates open to the public. I also support the idea because it allows the undemolished structure to be seen and evaluated by interested public while the applicant buys more time to seek consultations with outside experts in the field of historic restoration and to the necessary outreach and vital input they have promised. I myself, in the last 50 years, have restored over 15 historic processes. Those properties are in London, nationally listed, in New York City, nationally listed, and in Florida. I know very well that nothing I have ever seen could not be restored. I urge the members of the board to raise the question on the last 2 pages of my handout before making the decision. Now I invite you to walk the eastern border of the historic Indian Midden with me. These pictures speak thousands of words. The problems and questions will become obvious to your eye. That's the first picture I have. Can I move the mic with me toward the picture?
Sure, if you're, or maybe use I would leave that there and maybe use, we'll snag Jamie's wireless. Let's try that.
All right. At the top of the page, you see the property line. The first white line is a 5-foot cinder block wall that already exists on the property. This I don't believe you knew as this did not come any further than staff approval. The dotted line is the new white picket fence that was approved by the staff. Going down further is the historic boathouse. Now, for the first time, you're seeing how close the one-story private residence contributing structure, which I own, is from the boathouse. At one point, it is only 18 inches away from the boathouse. There is also, in the pink, a 5-foot-high cinder block wall that is dangerously close to the back wall of the boathouse. This means a lot of trouble if the boathouse back wall crashes into the cinder block wall, a wall which I do not believe belongs to the city. This has to be determined because in 2015, under the City Commission's review, this was determined to be an encroachment onto one or the other of the properties, either mine or the one the city now owns. This has to be addressed before you can go ahead and make a demolition. Finally, is the section of the property in which incorporates a large concrete slab and a seawall, both of which are in deplorable condition. You do not know from this application how any of these things will be addressed. These have been left off of the application. The next picture is a
Dr.
picture.
Kine, your time has expired. I'm going to just ask you to wrap it up if you could.
Wow.
I've given you about 90 seconds over your existing time.
Well, you'll have to look at the book because I have all these pictures in. This is the boathouse that I own, which is completely restored. The white wall, okay, is part of the boathouse that you want to destroy. And you'll see the white cinder block wall, which is holding back the erosion from the 18 inches higher land elevation than my property. Okay, all of the eroded water, when that's taken out, is going to pour onto my property. Also, that is the worst thing you can do with a midden, is to allow erosion to happen because it destroys everything that's underneath it over time. As you can see from the picture of my boathouse, the water rises every time we get high tide. It flows under my boathouse, down a channel, and the water also comes down from the property that the city owns. My recommendation is, as I stated, get more information, see what can be done, and give some outreach to the people like me who live around it, who have a stake in it, and the people that are in the Civic Association. I'm on the Parks Commission there, and I've had no meaningful interaction with the Parks Commission.
Dr. Kine, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public wishing to be heard? Hearing none, we will go ahead, seeing none, seeing or hearing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the board for comments and questions. Mr. Marcus, I'm going to go to you first. Your question for Trish or the applicant?
Tricia, I, two questions. One, when was this building built, this boathouse?
We don't have a specific date in our records. When we looked at the Sanborn maps, it was there as of 1964, I believe is the date, in the 60s. The last time it was updated, it was on that map, but we don't have a specific date of construction.
And my second question is, what, do you want to recognize? I do. He knows the answer.
Let's
Yes.
ask your second question first, and then we'll get to there. Okay.
Could we just have him go to the mic?
Yeah,
It's got to be on the record, and it's got to be in closed caption for those.
Yep. Dr. Kine, please state your name and your address on the record again prior to addressing the inquiry by Mr. Marcus.
David Kiner, 934 Waverly Road. Yes, I've researched the property completely. It is mentioned as existing already in 1941. All right, so I believe it to be actually slightly above that because it was the first time when they went for a building permit was in 1941. I suspect it's probably from the 30s. My boathouse is supposedly from 1938.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's sufficient. Thank you very much. Tricia, my question was also, what is the architectural significance?
Usually when it comes to secondary structures and reviewing them, we're looking at the main structure on the property and how it relates to that. In this case, the main structure has already been demolished. So the relationship between that and the secondary structure is not there. And in this case, any architectural detailing that was there previously is not there. From a limited amount of research, we could not locate drawings or photographs of what this would look like. It's highly discouraged to project
Of course.
architectural features onto a structure when considering them for rehabilitation. So just to keep that in mind.
Understood. I'm sorry, Mr. Marcus, you have additional?
Go ahead.
As we were sitting here during the public comment, it dawned on me, and Sherry, I want to ask you a quick question. Now that Mr. Bray has recused himself, are we still permitted to vote on this item?
No,
Because we do not have,
a quorum.
well, one moment, because we have a quorum to act. But does the recusal, which limits the number of votes possible, limit our ability to vote?
That's what I was wondering.
Well, normally you'd have to vote with five votes. That's a
We
problem.
don't have 5.
So then,
So can we vote with 4? That's the
No.
question.
well,
We can't.
You can't. You can
Okay.
continue it, but unless there's a board member, Richard Rosa, who may step in any time. Tricia, what did he say? Did he say he's coming?
Yeah.
Want to give him a call?
He didn't respond.
You want to give him a call?
Sure.
Can we take a break? Like a 5-minute break?
well, here's my question. The necessity for a quorum is to hear business before the board. It is not to take a vote. So the meeting is in order because we do have a quorum present. The fact that a member chooses to essentially abstain from a vote or recuse themselves from consideration of a certain item, I'm not sure that that affects the quorum requirement. I don't know what the statute reads as far as whether it's voting members or is it members present. Maybe you can clarify that for me, and if we need to take a break to research it, I'd like to get that answer before moving forward, because I'm not so sure that Mr. Bray's recusal prevents the board from acting on this item, but it certainly may, and I think we need that answer before we go forward.
Sure.
All right, so let's go ahead and we'll be in
5
recess for 5 minutes, and we'll look up that legal
Okay.
answer. Order. The meeting will be called back to order at 5:51 PM. After consulting with the city attorney, based on Mr. Bray's recusal from this item and the number of members present being the bare minimum to establish a quorum, without Mr. Bray's vote, we do not have a quorum of voting members of the board on this item. And the code and, the applicable codes and statutes require a majority vote of the quorum voting members present. I think I said that right. And so I do not believe that we satisfy the statutory requirements, therefore we cannot consider this item. It'll be rolled over till next month's agenda. All right. So we'll readdress it next month.
In the meanwhile, can we get clarification on a few issues?
We cannot, because we don't have a quorum to consider it. We really shouldn't have, that's on me. I should have noticed it earlier. I should have thought about it. Well, actually, no, I'm going to blame staff. It's
I
not Sherry.
wondered when he recused himself. Yeah.
But I'm going to blame them and say they should have picked it up for me.
Right.
But I should have recognized that. I
Worry, Jason.
wasn't thinking about it. So we really shouldn't have heard any information on this item once Mr. Bray disqualified himself. So I'm going to say let's hold off until next month, but jot your questions down so we can get clarification next month.
Yes.
All right, so that will bring us to, sorry, city, you're going to have to get some extra overtime, I guess. I know that's a funny thing when I said that, whoever laughed. We all know that was a joke. Communicate, although we should with the amount of taxes that I pay in this town, I'm just saying. Communication to the city commission, I don't believe we have any. That's going to bring us to item 6 for the good of the city of Fort Lauderdale. Is a review of the proposed amendment to section 47-24.11 City of Fort Lauderdale Unified LDR to include an option to designate thematic historic districts and to amend existing historic preservation criteria and procedures a la Mr. Marcus. So let's hear the staff report on this and let's get a little bit of an update.
Sure. Did you have something to add, Mr. Marcus?
I can't hear her, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Oh,
you
are
looked
you having
like you
trouble
were
hearing?
going to ask a question, but you cannot hear?
Just so everyone's aware, the closed caption is there for,
Or just talk about
for
the
you
thematic
guys.
historic.
well, if you look at the screen, you can see the closed caption. Everything we're saying is in the closed caption, so
Yeah,
just
but
in
it's
case anyone
delayed.
has trouble hearing, well, just
It's
as.
delayed.
Okay,
It's very
yes.
difficult to read.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we're going to talk about the thematic district right now. So Trish, go ahead and let's hear the city report.
Sure. Good afternoon, board members again. This item is before you due to a request from the Historic Preservation Board that was sent as a communication to the City Commission in October of last year to create an amendment to the code to allow for a thematic district creation within the ordinance. So with that direction that we received from the City Commission to move forward, staff has been working on a text amendment. This was included in your backup information with the strikeout and underline of the proposed amendment to the code. It's a long document, but there is an outline in the staff report of the proposed amendments, just summarizing the intention of what is to be achieved. So the first item that's listed is to give the city the ability to designate thematic historic districts in the city of Fort Lauderdale.
I'm sorry, Trish, just 1 minute. Ms. Pearson, if you and Dr. Kiner could take your conversation outside chambers, I'd appreciate it. No, you're fine. I just want to make sure that there's nothing distracting my colleagues up here on the dais from hearing the presentation. Thank you. Appreciate that. Go ahead, Trish.
So there are updates throughout the code that reference thematic historic districts, define that, what it means, as well as identify what a thematic historic resource is. There's additional definitions beyond that that clarify some language in the code. So the definition for applicant, agent, site improvement, and visible from the public right-of-way have been included in the definitions. And then the next thing would be the modifications to historic designation section to clarify the application process and procedures for historic designation. Since we were in that section of the code to add the thematic historic districts, it was an opportunity to restructure that information so that it was more clear to an applicant coming before the city with an application for designation. And then the next item listed is some amendments to the criteria for review of certificates of appropriateness. Some of the language was outdated, and it gave us a chance to streamline and
Do you mean
clarify.
ancient? It was ancient language, possibly written in Sanskrit?
Well, it wasn't that far back, but we did take a look at the language to modify it and streamline it so that it was more clear in analyzing an application from staff's point of view, but also for anyone applying for a certificate of appropriateness. That was primarily to the certificate of appropriateness section for new construction, where it didn't completely align with our design guidelines. The next item listed is additional references to Florida state statutes, one state statute that gives guidelines for the amount of time that staff has to review an application. So additional language was put in the ordinance related to that, as well as a new ordinance, Florida State Statute 553.79, which gives the ability to demolish certain structures that are designated individually as historic properties if they were designated after a certain time period and are located in flood zones. And then there's several different miscellaneous edits throughout, which are hard to capture in a bullet list, but primarily the intention is to streamline, clarify, and just have a better ordinance for the historic preservation program. So with that, the Historic Preservation Board does not have to, is not tasked with making a vote on this item, but it is usually important to the Planning and Zoning Board to understand the perspective of the Historic Preservation Board and whether or not they support the proposal for the amendments. So we do ask that the Historic Preservation Board consider making a motion to the effect of whether or not they support this. And then following this meeting, unless there's a request for additional time for review, then this item would go to the Planning and Zoning Board for review and ultimately the City Commission for 2 readings for adoption.
So Trish, I have 2 questions. I'm sorry. Are you finished?
I am done.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to step on you there. I just have 2 quick questions about some of the definitions that are listed, specifically 39 and 40. 39 being thematic historic district. It starts off a geographically defined area designated as a thematic historic district. Geographically defined area is somewhat vague, especially if it is, if they are sites or structures that are non-contiguous. So can you talk to me a little bit about why that wording is used or chosen? And the second question I have speaks to definition 40, thematic historic resource, and why the word resource is chosen as opposed to property. Or maybe Sherry is the person
answering?
to answer
I didn't
that.
choose resource. I don't like it either.
Okay, all right.
I chose
I'm sorry. But I know that's in some other codes, so it's probably just, so we can change it if Tricia would like, but
And-
go ahead.
Yeah, in general, with historic properties, a way to encapture all of the properties that are designated either through a district or individually or a site, the way to capture that is through the word resources. So it's typical.
Well, yeah, and I just found it unique because the title of the definition is thematic historic resource, but the definition is, and I know you're not supposed to use the word that you're defining in the definition, right? But a property located within a thematic historic district.
Right.
So I guess the follow-up question is, if you have a historic property within a historic district, is it defined as historic resource?
It's a resource, yes.
Yeah, it is.
Yes,
Look
but
at
it
the-
is
on a side
either
note.
also a contributing property or a non-contributing property.
Hmm.
In a thematic historic district, all properties identified within that district are technically contributing, but they need a term to define them. And then the fact that it says geographically defined,
Right.
you would identify a boundary.
Like a US 1 corridor or something like that.
Right. You would describe the location of its extent. It could be citywide. It could be federal highway between Commercial and Oakland Park.
I see.
It could be, a
Right.
particular neighborhood. So you'd still describe its location or general locations.
Well, Mr. Marcus,
I don't mean to
just
interrupt,
one
go ahead.
couple more. Hang on 2 seconds for me. Definition 23, by the way, the R in resource under the title should be capitalized to be consistent with the rest of the definitions. Historic resource.
It's an
So
older definition.
I would just capitalize that R in the
Sure,
title.
we'll
note
be
that.
glad to do that.
Go ahead, Mr. Marcus. I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget that.
I had the same question,
Get into that mic, Mr. Marcus. You eat it. Eat that mic, sir. Get in there.
Is it on?
That's better.
Is it on?
There you go.
I had the same question that Mr. Blank raised. I think geographically defined area under the definition of thematic historic district, it sounds a little misleading because we go on to say that it's buildings or structures that are not contiguous, but now we're talking about a geographically defined area.
Well,
Just thinking of another word to use.
Well, what we want to make sure to do is that we want to make sure that there is an area that is actually defined, that's clear of where it is. So in the past, nobody really knew where these things were. And so we want to make sure in the application, we actually ask for a legal description. So
Okay.
it's only 2 properties that don't have to be contiguous. The rest can be. It
Well,
just
but there may be more than 2 properties.
Exactly, there may be more.
So what I'm looking at this in the very beginning, wouldn't it be more correct, bad English, to say geographically defined areas designated as a thematic historic district? Because it is more than one area.
I like that change.
areas.
Yeah, so capitalize the G in geographic. So geographically defined areas designated as a thematic historic district. I think that would be more appropriate. I like that. That would be my recommendation, because if you are talking about potentially, I mean, you could be talking about, now watch me use my new knowledge here, thematic historic resources
Right.
that are contiguous, they still could qualify as a thematic historic district, or those which are non-contiguous,
Yes.
which are not contiguous, may also. So I think the fact is that you're talking about potentially multiple areas, but it could be one. But by limiting it to the singular, you are necessarily excluding multiple areas. Because what if you have, for example, let's say that you have the federal highway corridor between Sunrise and Oakland Park, and the Broward Boulevard corridor between 95 and 17th Street or 7th Street, whatever. There are multiple areas. It's not a singular geographically defined area.
So maybe
And
it's a
that would
parenthesis.
qualify as a thematic historic district, but possibly not as a historic district.
I guess what we were thinking of is even if it's separate areas, maybe one across the street from the other, it's one area for purposes of the same district.
Yeah, but what if they're in complete separate parts of the city, right? Because this, based on this definition, it could be, right?
Yes.
It could be one in the northwest section of town and one in the southeast section of town. Whereas I think that a definition, as you just described, Sherry, Ms. Wallen, excuse me, would lend itself more to the definition that's there and a typical historic district, whereas the premise here is that they could be far apart and still be considered a historic district in and of themselves, based on the unique factors there. So I think that I agree with Mr. Marcus, and I think my recommendation would be to modify paragraph or definition 39, thematic historic district, to read geographically defined areas, plural, designated as a thematic historic district would be more appropriate here. I think
Okay,
it
well,
probably save problems. That would be a recommendation.
We'll discuss it and,
Yeah.
okay.
That's a good point. I
And
like that.
potentially parentheses S.
I put the parentheses in my notes, yeah.
Yeah, or you could do that, right? You could do it that way as well. I like wordsmithing. This is fun. And also, I thought it unique, in, again, since we're really focusing on this, paragraph 39, the repetitive use of the word or. When you have the list, it's A, or B, or C. And it seems to me that the better way for it to read would be A, B, C, D, E, F, or G.
We just wanted to make sure that everything was very clear, because there's been some trouble with this ordinance with like.
I don't know why. You think that
not
things come before us are
understanding
unclear sometimes?
versus and. So we just wanted the average layperson to get it, that it's or versus and, so, just in case.
What is the trouble with the ordinance?
Not with you guys, it's just the
Oh.
average layperson, we would just want them to understand, not people not as educated as you are.
Yeah, but I think that the use of the word any of the following, right? The use of any of the following and the use of or would probably be more appropriate and more streamlined. It just seems clunkier,
I'm welcome
this
to
way.
that.
Ms. Carney, I'm sorry, did you have something you wanted to add?
So,
Okay.
a question
Mr.
for Tricia.
Ray? Yeah, please.
So what's the process after this?
The process after this, if the Historic Preservation Board would like to make a
They
motion.
can't do a motion now, no quorum.
Well, there is a
remember?
quorum.
No, there is a quorum now.
Oh, well, are you not recusing yourself? No?
No.
On this
Okay, just making sure. All right, go ahead. You can do a motion. You can do one.
If the Historic Preservation Board makes a motion and in some way to state their position on this proposed ordinance tonight, and it moves forward, the next item, it would next move forward to the Planning and Zoning Board. And depending on when they are ready to move it forward, then it would go to the City Commission for 2 readings.
Okay.
I want to give the rest of the board an opportunity to comment on this at all. Ms. Carney, you said you had nothing. Ms. Lyons, do you have any comments or questions or anything related to this?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bray?
Well, since this is something for the entire board to review, I would just assume have everybody else who is a board member actually have a chance to comment before it's approved for that very reason.
Well, I mean, they're not here. I'm not going to not act on something because we don't have a full membership
And we've
present.
talked about this before on the board.
Okay,
Yeah.
last October, all right.
Yeah, I think, and everybody received the materials, so they can always comment at planning and zoning. They can comment before the commission if they, disagree with the board's actions tonight. But if there are no other questions of Trish or no other comments or anything related to the item itself, I'd be happy to entertain a motion to support the ordinance subject to the proposed modifications
I
that
would
we
like
talked
to
about.
move to approve this ordinance.
Okay,
I
subject
don't
to
have the words in front.
I second it.
So, Mr. Mark is moving to, moving that the board support the ordinance, subject to the suggested modifications discussed tonight. Ms. Lyons having seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All right, hearing no discussion. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Okay, so the board will send its notification to planning and zoning that we do support the changes, subject to the modifications discussed here this evening. I think this could be a very unique thing if it put into place. Going to cause probably a lot of future long meetings, but I think it's going to be good. It could be very good and very interesting nonetheless. All right, so that'll bring us to item 6B on our agenda, review of the proposed Florida State Historic Marker text for Rivermont Archaeological Site. Proposed Rivermont marker text. Trish, you want to address that?
Yes. IT, could I have you project the presentation on the screen? So this is actually related to the Rivermont Archaeological Site as well, and it is a proposed historic state marker for the site. And what we do in these cases, when we have a proposal for a historic state marker, we do like to share that proposed text with the Historic Preservation Board to obtain any feedback prior to moving it forward through the process. Go ahead and project it on the screen. What is before you in the staff report does contain the proposed marker text. There is one small element that I tweaked in the second line where it says located in today's Sailboat Bend Historic District. I changed the word located to within because it was repetitive. So it now reads within today's Sailboat Bend Historic District. But if the board has any comments or recommendations for inclusion of text or language within this, then we're happy to hear that. Otherwise, we would be taking it to the State Historic Preservation Office as an application for a marker. They have a marker board that reviews the applications, and then ultimately, probably in a year or so, it would be installed.
Mr. Chair, oh gosh, now I lost my question.
See, that's why I told you,
Just
write
like
it
that.
down. Write it.
It'll come back.
I would.
Yes, I do have it now.
Go.
There you go. Very often in texts like these and markers like these, if there's a decent rendering of what the settlement may have looked like at one point in its history, it may be something that could augment the text.
So the State Historic Preservation markers don't allow for an
Okay.
image.
Well, that answers that question.
I would suggest, in the very first sentence, removing that is. So it reads, Rivermont is an archaeological site, part of what was once a large prehistoric site complex located on the north bank of the New River. I think that is just superfluous and unnecessary.
Okay, thank you.
Otherwise, it reads great.
Perfect.
Anybody else have any comment on this? Any action item needed?
No, not necessarily. If you do want to make a motion, it is something I could pass along to the State Historic Preservation Office as
Well, I think it's always good to have our
support.
voice heard if we are in fact supportive of it. So if there's a feeling amongst the board of support for the marker text, I would encourage a motion to support the text and for that communication to be sent up to the Florida Historic Board. Go for it, Mr. Bray. All right. Well, hearing none, we'll remain mute on that. I'm supportive. I can't make a motion, though. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
I would also like to introduce our new staff member, DeAndrea Moyes. She's an urban planner too. She's sitting over here. And she'll be joining us with historic preservation, and you'll probably see her name on staff reports. And she'll
Did you guys hear that? We have another staffer in the department. Woo-hoo! Trisha's not going to have to do it all by herself anymore.
Yeah, and in the future, she'll present items.
There you go.
Great, that's
Yeah.
great.
We also have Amanda Four, in case any of you weren't here before when I introduced her, but she's a planning assistant who is helping out with the Historic Preservation Board as well. And so she'll be sending you emails to ask if you're coming to the meetings. She'll be sending out agendas, things like that. So you'll see her name pop up.
Great. Well, welcome to the team, folks. And we look forward to you being part of this show. We'll just call it a show tonight. Any other matters for the good of the order or any other matters that need to be addressed by the board?
What day is September's meeting scheduled on due to the fact Labor Day is the first Monday of the month?
Yeah, it's scheduled for Wednesday, September 7th, I believe. Let me just double check. Yeah, Wednesday, September 7th, due to the holiday.
It is.
I thought we had rescheduled the September meeting a long time ago.
We rescheduled the October meeting. So just as a reminder, since we are getting near, our October meeting is scheduled for Monday, October 17th.
October 17th, okay.
And what date was it in September?
September 7th, Wednesday, September 7th.
Wednesday, the 7th.
I'm letting everybody know I'll be landing from a trip.
Yeah, I can't be here either.
I'll be landing from a trip in Hawaii at 3 p.m. So I'm hoping my flight will not be delayed and I will make it here in time, probably in an aloha shirt with a lei. I gotta have fun. Don't worry, Ms. Lyons, I'm not gonna wear my coconut bikini. All right, any other matters to be addressed this evening? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I move we adjourn.
Meeting's adjourned at 6:16 p.m. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great